Hi, I'm Wendy, and my co-host Daniel and I are talking about why divorce doesn't suck. Our podcast is all about the life you can live and how you can thrive after divorce. You'll hear regular people's stories of divorce and how they reinvented themselves and grew after divorce. You will also hear from experts in the field of marriage and family, sex and relationship coaches, lawyers, and so much more. You will learn lots of great tips on dating from both people who lived it and thrived, and also dating coaches who will share their advice about how to get it right and also how to have fun. We get real here at Divorce Doesn't Suck. Join us in this conversation and the community we're building to help heal and thrive after divorce, because really, divorce doesn't suck. Needle Kuda divorce and family law attorneys have helped Connecticut families through this process for over 30 years. They understand divorce is so much more than the legal dissolution of a marriage. Divorce is about finding and accepting a new path forward, defining your new family, and securing an enforceable agreement that secures your future. Their experienced attorneys and paralegals are first and foremost committed husbands and wives, mothers and fathers, daughters and sons, who are all devoted to protecting Connecticut families. Put the strength, wisdom, and experience of Needle Kuda behind you and move forward with confidence. Visit them at needlekuda.com.
This episode is brought to you in part by the Needle Kuda Law Firm, guidance that moves lives forward.
Welcome to another episode of Divorce Doesn't Suck. I'm Wendy Sloan here with my co-host Daniel Herrold. Daniel, how is it possible that we are in mid-February?
Man, and it's 2023. How many times have you messed up? Well, nobody writes checks anymore, but how many times have you wrote 22? I do it all the time still.
I every year I do the same thing.
And is your Christmas tree still up, or any of your Hanukkah
Well, I got a little, first time in my life, I got a little real Christmas tree. So it's real, so it's alive still, and it's like this big. It's so cute. Has lights on it.
And it's odd driving by houses and you still see the trees in the house. You're like, okay, it's mid-February. It's time.
It's time. I know Easter stuff is already in the stores. Valentine's Day stuff, even though we just passed it, is, little tiny bits of it. Crazy.
Now it's St. Patrick's. St. Patrick's is coming up.
That's right. It's amazing. Time's just moving. I feel like this time of year, time just goes even faster for some reason.
Yeah, it does. And then summer hits and then summer flies by. It's just all too fast. I think as you get older, things move faster. At least that's my perspective.
I agree. I'm just happy we're going to be in some warm weather, even though the groundhog always says the same thing. 6 more weeks of winter. Okay, we know it already. We don't need to see you anymore. Right. Anyway, this is right. It's like just give us the spring and the summer, right? We're done. We're done with the winter. And then I miss the winter, but I have to say I had not one plow this winter. Not one plow.
See, I wouldn't even know what that terminology means. I know what a plow is, but I mean, when you're in Tulsa, you maybe get one snowfall a year. And we don't have to plow. We just shovel out and we're done.
We had no snow. So that was, a little dusting, but I don't consider that like
snow yet.
We had one snowstorm, but it was like in and out. So anyway, this is our 6th of our 12th series, Mapping Your New Path Forward with attorney Melissa Needle of Needle Kuda Divorce and Family Law. Today's topic is a big one, contested custody. And there's so much involved in that. We're going to let Melissa decide where to begin. Welcome back, Melissa Needle.
Hey, Melissa.
Hello, Wendy. Hello, Daniel. How are you guys today?
Well, February, beautiful weather outside, getting closer and closer to spring. So happy.
Such an optimist.
Yes, I try to be.
Yeah. Melissa, what's the busy season for divorce attorneys? Like, when is there a season where it's like super busy versus a slower season, or is it just nonstop crazy?
I would say it's generally nonstop crazy because over the holidays, although a lot of people aren't starting a divorce, there's always issues with regard to the holiday season and vacation and family traditions and who's going to be where when. And so these emergency issues always pop up between the week before Thanksgiving through, January 1st. And so although people tend not to start a divorce, the phone is constantly ringing.
Yeah. Never ends.
You didn't turn over my kid for Thanksgiving, or you were late, or you were some of those things happen. I can see that now that you say that over the holidays.
Yes, exactly.
Is there a big, this is one thing I was very curious about. Since COVID, is there a big change in the system, in the court system, in the divorce system? Is there more like Zoom calls? Is there still the same in person? Like, how has that changed?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Wendy. And I can speak for the state of Connecticut because that's where I practice. And the system has completely transformed since COVID. It's really difficult to get into court to get a matter or an issue heard by the court. They're very backlogged from the period of time when the court was closed. Um, and so there's a lot of remote hearings and pre-trials and status conferences. But I would say the biggest issue is the challenge in getting into court whenever there is an issue to be heard.
Wow. So that
Is
must
this
be
still
tough.
backed up? Is this, I mean, I'm sure we got so backed up because of COVID. Is it still backed up
Yeah,
or is it
it's
clear
very
through?
backed up.
That's crazy. That really is. So everything's delayed. That's not easy for you guys. And I'm sure it's not easy for the families that are,
Yeah,
that
I
are
mean,
getting.
it's really difficult for the divorcing families. For example, if one spouse just refuses to pay for, half of daycare, for example, and
Mhm.
or refuses to pay child support, then it's difficult to get into court in a timely fashion to get these issues addressed, which can be very important.
Well, hopefully that all comes together. It's been a while now,
And
so.
so a lot of what we've done as a result of that backlog is we have turned to a different process, either arbitration or mediation, because you can control that process and get decisions made in a more timely fashion if you hire a arbitrator, which is
Mhm,
basically a private judge,
mhm.
and they issue a decision, and then the court just approves that decision. And then there's some order for the family. Things aren't as chaotic. Or you can hire a private mediator, and the mediator can make recommendations. And if you have two people that are willing really to open up their minds and want some order in the family, that can be a really good avenue to resolve issues as well.
I would assume even those people that like to fight in court, they might like that as well because at least they have something that gets done.
It's a little bit more civilized as well. It
Yeah.
just, you're in control of the process, you're in control of the dates, you're in control of the time, you're in control of the rules, you're in
Mhm.
control of who is going to be selected as the arbitrator or mediator. So it's a little bit, I like to describe it as more civilized. Um, because you have more control over the process. That's the benefit. The downside is that it costs a little bit more money because you have to pay whoever you appoint, either as the arbitrator or the mediator. So it's really a cost benefit analysis, but you also have to recognize that there are often times when your case is assigned in the court system
Mhm.
and you pay your lawyers to prepare and prepare and prepare. And then maybe the week before, a few days before, the day before the hearing, it could get canceled and continued. So it's not always more expensive to hire a private arbiter than using the court system, because of the constant delays that exist within the system.
Must be frustrating.
It's so frustrating. It's frustrating emotionally, and it's very costly.
Yeah. People want
Is
closure. So I
Yeah.
just can't, I mean, I can imagine a cancellation after or continuance after continuance. They're probably so frustrated where, probably a lot of people look back in hindsight and wish, man, I wish we would have hired a mediator 6 months ago to get this thing settled.
Yeah, it happens quite a bit. And in Connecticut, a judge has 120 days to issue their decision. It doesn't mean that they'll take all that time,
Painful.
But oftentimes they cut close. Whereas with an arbitrator, you can decide how long they have to issue their decision. And so that also is a huge benefit because you get finality and closure in a much streamlined process.
I'll never forget that day, that phone call. It's like, wait, that's like one moment in my life, like watching where I was when OJ was in the chase. I'll never
Right.
forget that moment.
Yeah, it's a real butterflies in the tummy moment when a decision is issued, whether it's from a judge or an arbitrator. You've worked so hard and prepared and presented evidence and waited, years possibly for this moment. And it's can be very stressful and exciting, and really it's what you're waiting for.
From an attorney's point of view, I bet for you too, like just waiting to see it besides the client, opening that up, being like, all your hard work.
Yeah, well, I mean, especially I feel that at Needle Kudo, one of the things that really sets us apart is we really care about our clients.
That's right.
So the decision not only matters to our clients, but it matters a lot to us as well, because, you get to know your clients throughout the process and the result is important. So it's not a matter of, oh, well, that's it. We feel it deeply.
Yes. So let's talk, what exactly is contested custody?
Okay, so that's a really good question, Wendy, because oftentimes people get confused about custody. And I like to describe it, there are two types of custody. There's legal custody and there's physical custody. And legal custody means who is going to make the major decisions that impact the child. For example, what schools will they go to? What doctors will treat them? And major decisions like that impact their welfare and their general well-being. Physical custody is more of an issue of what will the access schedule be? Where will the children primarily live? And what time will they spend with the other parent? And I often say to clients that the physical custody piece of it is more important on a day-to-day basis, because it's really, when are you going to get to interact and see your children? Whereas the legal custody is really just decision making. Most cases end up with joint legal custody. It's very difficult for one parent to get sole custody. There really have to be some extenuating circumstances. But everyone has to decide physical custody. Everyone has to decide some sort of access schedule, unless you have kids that are, 16 or 17 years old, and it's kind of difficult to tell a child where to go at that age. So a conflicted custody case, a high conflict custody case, is one where parents cannot agree on who will get the decision making for the children. So if you feel that your spouse has such issues with parenting or co-parenting so that you won't be able to come to decisions together, then that would be a high conflict custody case. So for example, if the conflict between the parents is so deep, and each parent is so entrenched in their position that if one parent says black, the other parent says white, what that results in is no decisions are ever made for the child.
Right.
And it's really the child that suffers. And in those situations, one parent has to be in charge. And that would be a high conflict custody case where both parents are saying that they are better equipped to make the decisions that impact the child, that they're able to rise above the conflict and to see clearly what the child needs.
I have two questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
How does the judge make that decision? Who ultimately, if there is such a polarity and they can't get along and make legal decisions on behalf of their kids, what's the process where I've just never experienced that before. So how does a judge make that decision that, okay, the husband or the wife, either one is the sole decision maker when it comes to the legal decisions?
Well, there's usually, a couple, there's many different factors that, the statutes, no matter what state you're in, will direct the court to review to determine what's best for the child. Okay. So in the situation that I just described, there is usually one parent that is more focused on the conflict than on what's best for the child. And there will be evidence presented so that the court can determine which parent really is more connected to the well-being of the children, and that is the parent will ultimately get sole custody. And so it's very careful that you hire a good divorce lawyer to make sure that if you're in that situation, that you have evidence to present to the judge that you are able to see beyond the conflict with your spouse, that you're able to parent the child, and that you have the capacity to co-parent regardless of what the conflict is. And so oftentimes I will guide my clients to say, if you take your child to a doctor appointment, immediately send an email to the spouse and say, I took Susie to the pediatrician for her well visit today. She got the chickenpox vaccination. She's in the 70th percentile in height and weight, and just show a capacity and a willingness to co-parent. That will go a long way in the judge's eyes.
And what about visitation? Who decides how much one parent gets as opposed to the other parent gets?
So that's where oftentimes there is a lot of conflict about the parenting schedule and what's best for the children in terms of how much time they should spend with mom and how much time they should spend with dad. And if the parents don't live in the same community, there's oftentimes a fight about who will be the residential parent for purposes of school. And that too is very important and can lead to a conflict. And each family is different. So I can't really speak generally about schedules because it depends on so many different factors. It depends on the ages of the children. It depends on, the parents and their work schedule. It depends on any special needs that the children may have. It depends on how long children have lived in a community. It depends on the connection of the children to each parent. So it just depends on a lot of different factors that are different within every family. And, it's one of the hardest things about a divorce. The idea that you're not going to be sleeping under the same roof as your children every night it's a difficult concept to embrace. And it's one of the realities of divorce. And it is a very, very challenging and emotionally charged issue, and oftentimes can lead to the biggest fight.
I can see that toughest. Is there an age where, and I'm sure it's different in every state, that a child can decide which parent to live with?
Well, I don't think it's necessarily an age. It's more on the maturity level of the child. So you can have a very sophisticated, mature, well put together 16-year-old, and you can have the family next door who has a very immature, child of the same age who doesn't want to be involved and just told where to go and what to do. So there's not a particular age. It depends more on who the child is and where they are in their developmental stage.
Is that always an evaluation that the courts make? Is okay, to consult or evaluate the child to determine what their view is, depending on the maturity?
It really depends on the conflict. I think lots of times parents know their children and they'll say, I can't make Susie go. She's
Right.
not going to go. I can't make her go. And usually the other parent recognizes that. And the child, if they are of a certain maturity level, will tell the parent, I'm not going. I don't care what you do. I don't care what you say. I'm not going to go. And so sometimes parents will still try to push the issue. Um, but the child wishes and desires as they get older is one factor that courts will typically consider. It's not what does the child think? End of story, end of discussion, let's move on. It's one factor, and it's an important factor, obviously, especially if the child is, in their teenage years.
If you just tuned in, we're talking what is contested custody with attorney Melissa Needle. We'll be right back right after this break. Our Family Wizard is a leading app for more peaceful co-parenting. It streamlines communication and helps you avoid conflicts about things like expenses and scheduling, which we all know are two areas that are full of contention for many co-parents. On Our Family Wizard, you can do things like handle schedule changes, pay child support, and even send messages, which, unlike texts and emails, can't be deleted or manipulated. Plus, you can control how you're notified when your co-parent messages you. No more angry texts from your ex hitting your phone screen out of the blue. It's easy to see why Our Family Wizard is the #1 co-parenting app trusted by more than 1 million parents and family law professionals. Learn more at ourfamilywizard.com today. We're back. This is our 6th of our 12-part series, Mapping Your New Path Forward, with attorney Melissa Needle of Needle Kuda Divorce and Family Law. This is really a hard topic to talk about because I think this is the most emotional of pieces of the divorce.
Yeah, I always say that to my clients. There's how do we, you have all your assets and how are you going to divide that in a divorce? And, that can be very scary because that offers you some security. But always the most difficult, challenging, emotionally charged issue are those around the children. I mean, there's no question that those are always the main issues, and people really want to try to make sure they get those right.
Well, so what if there's we talk about the backup in the court system, and I would assume a lot of custody issues that are ongoing through a divorce, an emergency may pop up where a decision needs to be made because there's some sort of, issue that pops up. Is there ability to fast track? What if like Susie doesn't want to go visit their mom, period, and she's entrenched herself in her dad's home, and and that's not how it was agreed upon during this process. I mean, are there ways to get emergency type actions in this process?
Yeah, there are, and I'm sure it's different in every state. I know in Connecticut, you can file emergency motions if you feel that there are issues surrounding the children that are creating psychological harm to them. Or of course, if they're in danger in
Right.
any manner. So there are ways to get into court if there are serious circumstances related to the children. And the courts usually will address those on the papers and then assign a court date within a certain period of time that's dictated by statute. And then everyone comes in on that assigned date and sort of expresses their point of view about the child or the children. And that is a way to get into court quickly to get issues resolved.
Okay.
That's good that they still have that. I know we've touched on this before, this topic before, but can you explain the GALs and AMCs and
Yeah.
when they're brought in and who needs them and why and
Yes.
what they are?
Okay. Well, first, let me start by saying the GAL stands for guardian ad litem, and the AMC stands for attorney for minor child. And they have two very different roles. The GAL is appointed to express to the court what they think in their role as guardian for the children, what is in the children's best interest as it relates to custody, such as where, physical custody or legal custody. And in order to make their recommendations, they have to do certain things. So they will talk to the parents, they will observe the parents with the children. They may talk to a therapist, a pediatrician, a teacher, whatever collateral person can offer some insight. The attorney for the minor child is an attorney appointed to tell the court what the child wants. So sometimes the guardian and the attorney express different things to the court. So if a guardian thinks that it's important for a child to spend, significant time with dad, because the guardian believes it's in the child's best interest, but the child expresses to the attorney, I don't want to go to dad's, then the attorney tells the court that I've spoken to my client and this is what my client has said. So the guardian and the attorney in that situation are saying two different things to the court. And so they have very different roles. And as a result, what usually happens is that for younger children who aren't mature enough to really understand what's going on, a guardian is appointed. For older children who are old enough and mature enough to articulate their own desires in a reasoned and thoughtful way, an attorney is appointed to represent them. In some situations, both an attorney and a GAL are appointed. And those are the real high conflict cases.
Oh my gosh, I can't even imagine.
Right.
So is the judge the tiebreaker if the guardian disagrees with the attorney?
The judge isn't the tiebreaker. The judge is the decision maker.
Right.
So what everyone has to understand is both the attorney for the minor child and the guardian are just making recommendations.
Right.
So what they're recommending is not binding on the court. I have been involved in cases where a guardian has said one thing and a judge has ruled something entirely different. So you have to understand that just because the GAL or an AMC are making recommendations doesn't necessarily mean the judge will follow it. In my experience, typically they will follow it, but it's just a recommendation. Specifically in relocation cases, those are very difficult cases to manage. There is a separate statute if someone in Connecticut wants to relocate that has certain factors. Typically in those situations, either an attorney or a guardian will be appointed to represent the children. And so if the children are of, middle school age or younger, it probably will be a guardian. If they're, maybe in 8th grade or through 12th grade, then perhaps an attorney would be appointed. So in those cases, it is very common to have an AMC or a GAL.
What does custody evaluations mean, and when does that come into play?
So a custody evaluation is, it can mean a bunch of different things. But generally, a custody evaluation is when someone is appointed to evaluate the family and, again, make recommendations to the court about what they believe, in their opinion, is in the children's best interest. And there can be a custody evaluation based on legal custody. There could be a custody evaluation asking the evaluator to make recommendations about a schedule that's in the best interest of the children. There could be a custody evaluation in relocation cases about what's best for the children. And the different type of evaluations really run the gamut. You can have an evaluation done by Family Services, which is a division of the courthouse and is free. Most of the Family Services officers are social workers by training. They will get to know both parents. They will observe the parents in their house. They will speak to collateral contacts, and they will make recommendations about what they think is best for the children. You can also appoint a psychologist to do a custody evaluation. And you typically appoint a psychologist in those cases where you believe that one of the parents has some sort of psychological functioning that will impact their ability to parent or co-parent. And the psychological custody evaluator will not only speak to the parents, observe the parents with the children, speak to collateral contacts, but they will also do psychological testing to make a determination on the parent's ability to parent and co-parent, and make recommendations based off their examination. And that could be expensive as well. There is a cost involved with a private evaluation that does psychological testing. But it can be very, very informative. So depending on the issues that present, when I talk to a client, I may recommend that we request some sort of custody evaluation that includes psychological testing. There's some situations where someone will say, for example, I just want to relocate. There's nothing wrong with my spouse. And so then we could have Family Services do the evaluation. If someone comes to me and says there's some substance abuse issues or there's domestic violence issues, those are the cases where I really like to have a psychologist do the evaluation, because those deal with more psychological issues. A spouse can have a borderline personality disorder, a narcissistic personality disorder, and those types of disorders seriously impact a parent's ability to co-parent, and can really be informative to the court when trying to decide who's going to make decisions related to this child or children, and what should the schedule be.
In closing on this contested custody, and I don't think we're done with this. I think there's a lot more to be talked about and said, because there's so much. My question is that you're always told, and of course you always want what's in the best interest of the children, always. Hopefully everyone wants that. So how do you explain to the kids when you're not supposed to involve them, and you really try to shield them from the divorce and from the process and from all this? How do you explain to them when a GAL or an AMC is put into their lives, or they have to go for an evaluation, or something like this happens, because you're trying to leave the children out of it.
Right. So,
Yes, you're playing tug of war behind the scenes.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question, because the reality is in most of these high conflict custody cases, not only are the kids directly involved in the process, but kids are much wiser, I think, than a lot of parents give them credit for, and they know what's going on. I always say to my clients, one, you could talk to medical professionals about what to say to your children. I typically advise my clients to say to the children, Mom and Dad are trying to figure out what's best. These are the people that are going to help us come to a decision about what's best for you. Don't worry about it. We're going to figure it out, and we'll let you know once we do.
It's interesting. In my case, that's what I always said to my children, but they were always like, I don't want any part of this.
Right.
Like, just leave me alone. I don't want to deal with this. So this is a tough topic to talk about.
It is. It's really hard because the kids don't want to be involved.
No. They want to go on with their normal life and their activities, and the world revolves around them.
Right. And so you just say it's just like a doctor's appointment. It's something you never want to do, but you have to go through it. And I think
that's great.
As a parent, you need to express to the professionals that are involved in the case that the children have told you that they don't really want to be involved, that they just, want to go on with their life. And I think that if you've hired good professionals, they understand that, and they will really engage children as little as possible.
I think it goes to show that when you're in an issue like this, where you're dealing with custody and it's high conflict, you better have a good attorney to help you navigate through it. I just can't imagine someone going through this and not having an attorney that really knows how to navigate this maze. That would be really scary. And probably a lot of people get taken advantage of as a result.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's critical, if there are issues related to the children, to get a experienced matrimonial lawyer who you really feel comfortable with, because sometimes you don't even know what your goals are, and you need to be able to sort of talk through those goals, come up with a strategy to make sure that in the end, whatever happens is best for you and best for your children.
And we also talked about that. Remember, there's no time limit. So like I did, rush, because I felt the pressure. You don't have to rush. Take your time to find the right attorney that's for you.
Yeah, good advice.
So and you have to make sure that you don't rush when it comes to a decision as well. And that's why hiring a good lawyer who knows what your goals are is critical to have. That's the team, you and your lawyer. And
it's okay. You're busy. You're a lawyer. Your office busy because you're a good lawyer.
For the listener, this is the attorney's phone that keeps ringing. She's busy.
The phone is ringing off the hook.
Like I
said, it is really important to have a lawyer in your corner if you're going through this divorce process. And the lawyer needs to know what your goals are, so that I have so many clients who say, I just want this over with. I can't take it another day.
100%.
I don't care. And you need that lawyer to say, take a deep breath. You do care. These decisions are going to impact you. They're going to impact your children. And you have to be thoughtful and wise. And that's one of the critical roles that a good divorce lawyer plays.
Yeah.
Well, that's you. And over, I say it again, take your time, find the best attorney for you. Don't rush. Don't let anyone rush you into this process. Our next subject this was a lot, contested custody. I think we'll circle back to this because there's more to talk about. Up next on our next series with Melissa Needle of Needle Kuda Divorce and Family Law, we're going to be talking about extreme personalities, narcissist personality disorder.
Ooh,
I think a lot of people can relate to narcissists, and we're going to talk about gaslighting and what that means and so much more. So much information. Melissa, thank you for doing this with us each month. Everybody needs this, and it's very helpful.
Always a pleasure to talk to you too and to help the divorcing community.
That's what we're trying to do. Thank you so much.